Hey YouTube, Mr. Terry back here once again for another History Teacher Reacts video. Today I'm going to be checking out the Genghis Khan series that was done by Extra History. So this is going to include parts 1 and 2. I believe it's about a 6-part series, so stay tuned for the future videos. This is the second series I've done from Extra History. I also watched the one on Catherine the Great. So you can check that out, especially if you like the stuff that Extra History does. So part 1 is entitled Genghis Khan, Temujin the Child. Right, so probably going to be talking about his upbringing. Temujin is his real name. Genghis Khan is not his name. He had adopted later. So, all right. Before we begin, though, if you enjoyed this original video, make sure you go to the link below where I will have a link to the original video, so you can make sure to get the Extra History people a like and subscribe and the support, of course, that they deserve. If you have suggestions for further videos, you can put those in the comments section, or you can join our Discord, and there are places to place video recommendations there as well. A link to the Discord will be down below in the description as well. Okay, I think without any further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with episode 1 here, Temujin the Child. Let's see what they got. Okay, here we go.
A young woman gives birth to a son on an isolated hillside under the vast Mongolian sky, surrounded by strangers and far away from everything she had ever known. He would grow up to be a leader, to unite the nomadic tribes of Northeast Asia, to found the largest contiguous empire humanity has ever known. He would grow up to be Genghis Khan.
Most famous figures in history, for sure.
The story of Genghis Khan truly begins with his mother, Olun. Yes. A young warrior traveled to her tribe in search of a wife.
Very strong relationship with his mother.
He brought gifts for her and her family, and he lived and worked with them for several years. Then, according to steppe tradition, they married. Once married, they set out on a weeks-long journey back to his homeland and his tribe. But as they crossed the isolated mountain valleys together, they were ambushed by a group of hunters. These valley hunters, who were far too poor to afford the wedding gifts necessary to secure a marriage with a woman like Olun, resorted to the second most common way of obtaining a wife on the steppes: kidnapping. The couple knew that it was only a matter of time before the hunters found them. Olun, barely more than a teenager, embraced her husband one last time, and then, in a moment of true sacrifice, convinced him to escape without her. If she stayed behind, the hunters would be so preoccupied with her that her husband would have a chance to escape. As legend tells, as her love turned to ride away, she took off her shirt and gave it to him so that he would remember her smell. In the tradition of the steppe, each person's breath and smell constitutes a part of their soul. By giving her husband her shirt, she was offering him a reminder of her love and her very essence. This was the last time Olun and her husband would ever see each other.
That's incredible. Can you imagine if that was just a thing? You just like that was a legitimate way. I mean, not legitimate, but a way that people thought they could get wives is just, abducting them. And then it was just like, all right, I guess that's what happens, right? There's so much, of that kind of stuff here in this time period. But yeah, I didn't know that she had, like, originally, like, her true love or whatever, and then basically was forced to leave him to, in a way, kind of save his life, so that they wouldn't hurt him. So interesting. We're already starting off to an interesting story. I know the kind of bond or whatever between an interaction between Genghis Khan and his mother is one of the big parts of his life. So I'm glad they're adding some more detail to her, because a mother is going to have such a big impact on her son, and I'm interested to see when she does have him, what role did she play in the person he's going to become?
She was brought to live with her kidnapper, a man named Yisuge, and his extended family, including another wife and their 3 young children. Not
Not
long
uncommon
after,
to have
Olun
multiple
gave
wives.
birth to her first child, a son. The boy was named
we go.
Temujin, after a respected warrior that Yusuke had recently killed in battle. But Temujin did not
So you name your child after somebody you killed. Okay. Okay. Wonder if you do that if you like because you respected that person that you ended up fighting, like, oh, they were such a great warrior, your name's gonna live on through my children. Or you just liked the name. Just, oh, that's a good idea for a name, Temujin.
appear to live up to his namesake. He was a very timid child, easily frightened, scared of dogs, often bullied by his
Not adult
older
Temujin.
half-brothers. His father spared no love for him, once even forgetting him and leaving him behind when the tribe packed up to move to a new camp.
Wow.
So when
got
Temujin
daddy
turned
issues?
8, the earliest age at which it was acceptable to arrange a marriage for a boy, his father went out to find a family to marry him off to. Olun asked that they try to find a wife from her tribe, so he could grow up knowing some of his extended family. And it
Makes
was
sense.
agreed. They would ride to Olun's tribe. A few days into their journey, they stopped at a small yurt to eat and rest. The family hosting them had a young daughter named Borte. The children seemed to get along, and after some negotiation, Yusuke arranged for Temujin to work for the family for several years as a sort of dowry. By the time his service was
You usually see the dowry thing with the woman towards the male family. But yeah, I mean, it's happening in reverse here. But just an interesting way of kind of in older times about what marriage was viewed like, right? You could just like steal a wife or just get arranged, right? There's many cultures that have had kind of arranged marriages and so that you see that in the elites, right? You'll see that in places like Europe where it's like, all right, the prince of this kingdom and then the princess of this kingdom, and you combine them and you combine your military power. But yeah, the idea of marriage in these older times is so different than what we think of today. It's a completely different institution.
complete, the children would be old enough to marry. Thus, Temujin was betrothed to Borte, and his father left him behind to return to his wives and other children. Along the way back, Yusuke came across a group of warriors celebrating a feast. As he sat down to join them, one of them recognized him as the man who had killed their comrade, Temujin, the man Yusuke had named his son after.
Okay.
To exact revenge,
This could
they
be
secretly
awkward.
poisoned his food.
Yeah.
The poison didn't kill him immediately. He survived long enough to stagger home to his camp. His family realized the end was near and sent a messenger to summon Temujin, but they were too late. By the time Temujin returned, his father had died. Without
So the parents have some interesting background. The woman, right, the mother was stolen to be a wife. And then is now part of this other family, yeah, that's stolen her. They have a child, name it Temujin, after somebody he had killed. And then he meets up, dad meets up with a crew of people or whatever that now know him because they knew the original Temujin. So they exact revenge on him. So then his father is killed by poisoning. This is a pretty interesting backstory and childhood for Temujin, isn't it?
But they were too late. By the time Temujin returned, his father had died. Without anyone to provide for them, the 2 wives and 7 children Yusuke left behind were forced to fend for themselves. As their tribe abandoned them, Olun mounted a horse and mile after mile followed them, holding her husband's horsehair spirit banner aloft to remind them of the service he'd done. An old man took pity on them and spoke up, saying that the band should be ashamed of abandoning the family of a warrior. That moment forever changed Temujin, because, for his kindness, the old man was run through with a spear. Temujin was devastated. This tragic event marked the beginning of a long, harsh road that would eventually turn this young boy into Genghis Khan. That night, the tribe stole the family's animals and left,
Pretty
seemingly
traumatic.
condemning them to certain death. But once again, Olun saved not just her children, but the entire extended family. She spent days foraging for food. The children bent her sewing needles into fish hooks and made arrows from sticks to hunt rats and small birds. They learned to tie bones to their shoes to make ice skates, both to play and also to hunt animals
It's a
across
tough
the ice.
single mother
Temujin
story here.
learned not only survival techniques, but fundamental tactics. Temujin had few friends aside from his siblings and half-siblings in the isolated steppe, but he did manage to befriend another child whose family sometimes camped nearby, a slightly older boy named Jamuka. The boys hunted and played and explored the mountains together. Twice in their childhood, they swore an oath to be ande, or blood brothers. The first time, early in their friendship, they traded dice made from the knuckle bones of sheep, one of the few luxuries available to a child on the steppe. The second time, as young teenagers, they traded handmade arrowheads. After years of surviving as outcasts, Temujin's older brother began to assert himself as the leader of the family. To show his dominance, he stole a fish that Temujin had caught. Later that same day, he stole a bird that Temujin had shot while hunting.
Makes sense, right? You got the mother is, raising the children, and naturally the elder of the siblings are going to try to take more of an authority role, and of course there's the natural bullying, right, that all the families have. So you could see that Temujin getting bullied by his older brother. Of course he's going to react differently, I'm sure.
Upset, Temujin and his half-brother Belgute went to their mother to tell her what happened. She said that they should worry more about the tribe who had abandoned them than fighting amongst themselves. Emotions raged, and Temujin stormed out. He would take matters into his own hands.
On his brother.
He had had enough of other people taking from him. Killing his half-brother would make him the oldest male in the family. Then he would answer to no one. Temujin and Belgute tracked their older brother to a secluded spot in the woods. Their half-brother warned them that without him, they would have no allies left in the world. But the two brothers fired their arrows, and the shots were true. When they returned, their mother could read their actions on their faces. She was distraught. Before, they had been living as outcasts, but spilling blood made them criminals.
So yeah, this is where it's a little different than the older bullying brother of the family, right? You go, whatever, tell mom that big brother is picking on you, and then she basically says, stop tattling, and that's usually the end of it. No, he gets his other brother, and they kill the brother. So that's where this is not probably something that we can relate to.
Before, they had been living as outcasts, but spilling blood made them criminals. As a wanted fugitive, Temujin was forced to flee, but he was quickly tracked down and captured by the very clan that had abandoned him years before. He was put in stocks and made to live as a servant to the tribe's slaves. But Temujin did not resign himself to this fate. He bided his time, waiting for the right moment. One day, he had been put under the care of a particularly small and easily distracted young boy. The warriors in the tribe were intoxicated after a day spent drinking. When nobody was looking, Temujin quickly swung his stocks around and knocked his young guard unconscious. Putting his self-taught tactics to work, he hid in some reeds
bailed with
nearby.
the stock on him.
He knew that his captors would assume that he had tried to run away and attempt to chase after him. Once the warriors had left the camp, Temujin escaped his stocks with the aid of a sympathetic local family and fled into the night.
By the way, where is... anyone know where these sources are coming from about his early childhood? Did he just have biographers later on? I don't know much about Genghis Khan as an autobiographical writer either, so I'm interested to know some of the sources about some of these things. Because it's pretty interesting, this amount of some of the specific details. Anytime you hear specific details in history and very narrative type of things, it's important to get those sources. I think that's important to see where they come from and the legitimacy of them. So, I mean, nothing here has really been I guess an extraordinary claim that would require intensive amounts of sources on there, but it is important to do that.
Now 16 years old, Temujin had not seen his intended wife in 7 years. He went to find her, and surprisingly, she had waited for him to return. Despite knowing of his troubles with the steppe tribes, her family agreed to let the wedding proceed.
You would think, like,
according to
I
custom,
don't want you marrying my
brides
daughter
made
anymore.
a gift of clothing to the fathers of their husbands. The family offered Temujin a fine coat of black sable, the most prized fur on the steppe. But since Temujin's father was long dead,
like
he had a
the
better
Gucci
idea
clothes.
for how to use the coat. He
What?
approached an old ally of his father, Ong Khan, the leader of a prosperous tribe. Yusuke had fought by Ong Khan's side long ago and helped him overthrow his uncle to become the tribe's leader. Family
that's what you
ties
do,
were
right?
sacred in
You
steppe
overthrow the other
culture.
person.
Alliances were never forged in ink, only by blood. Anyone related to you was an ally. Literally everyone else was assumed to be an enemy. By presenting the coat to Ong
tough
Khan,
relationship,
Temujin
yeah.
was symbolically recognizing him as his father.
So he re-gifted.
Ong Khan accepted, recognizing Temujin as his son, and thus entitling both him and his family to the Khan's protection. He offered to make Temujin a local leader over other young warriors, but shockingly, Temujin declined. With his family's protection assured, he returned to his home camp to finally enjoy a peaceful life at home.
So this is I mean, he was at least 16 now. There are so many things moving around and events that have happened by your teenage years. And it's like, oh, okay, now maybe you can have a life.
He returned to his home camp to finally enjoy a peaceful life at home. His troubles must have seemed far behind him now that all the children were old enough to work in some way. They had their own camp, and they were under the protection of a powerful Khan. Temujin would have preferred to remain the ruler of this intimate clan, but the chaotic world of the steppe would not allow such a life. Learning that Temujin had married,
Very
the
chaotic.
tribe from which
Plans at
Temujin's
each
father
other's
had
throats,
abducted his mother,
always.
Olun, decided that the time was ripe to take revenge for her abduction. Although Temujin's father was no longer alive, revenge was a family obligation. But the Merkits came not to reclaim Olun, now a widow who had grown old struggling to raise 5 children, but for Borte, Temujin's young bride.
Okay, so they've set him up now for entering an adulthood. They talked about how it looks like his motivations here next, a lot of them are revenge based, and he has a lot to be vengeful for, from what happened to his parents to how he was treated by these other clans. And but you could see he's also kind of scheming his way up kind of the ladder, right? Regifting the gift to get in well with the Khan and that sort of thing. So you could see this like starting to happen even at a very young age here. So yeah, all right. So there's plenty, I guess, to motivate him if he wants to. And I guess in video 2 we'll see more of that. Okay. Good start though. A lot of stuff I didn't know about him. I knew he had a very important relationship with his mother, and you could start to see why. I had forgotten that he killed his brother. I had heard that before, but I'd kind of forgotten about that. But I thought the circumstances were a little bit different than what they were. I thought it was more like killing him because they end up going to like different tribes or were competing for political or military power and stuff like that. In this video, they made it seem a little mundane, with somewhat childish antics, right? Of dude took the bird he shot and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. It got down to that kind of situation. Okay, let's quickly flip over. So that was Temujin the Child, Part 1, and now we've
It's
got
a quiet morning just before dawn. In Temujin's camp, the family...
Let's go ahead and restart that. Genghis Khan, the Rivalry of Blood Brothers. So this is part 2. And this is, the second video that we'll be watching. The last video we'll be watching in our video right now. All right, what do we
It's a quiet morning just before dawn. In Temujin's camp, the family sleeps peacefully, thinking their troubles are behind them. They are very wrong. Even now, 300
somebody got him out of the
Merkit
stock,
soldiers
right?
thunder towards them on horseback, eager for a fight.
Yeah, constant thing. The Mongol tribes or whatever in this region
News
are
traveled
always at each
fast
other's
on the
throat.
ancient steppe,
No
and
one's
the
ever
story of
unified them.
Temujin's daring escape and new alliance with Ong Khan spread far and wide. His growing success got the attention of the Merkits, the tribe Temujin's father had kidnapped his mother from. They saw an opportunity
getting hard
to
to follow
knock
all the
Temujin
different
down a
tribes.
peg before he got too powerful. At Temujin's camp, an old woman was sleeping with her head on the ground, and suddenly she was awoken by the sound of approaching hooves. She alerted the camp. With little time to prepare for the attack, Temujin, his allies, his mother, and 5-year-old child all mounted horses and took flight.
Gotta
But
bail.
Borte was left behind. Nobody is sure.
How many times is this now where, like, people are getting left behind in these tribes and stuff? It's like, I don't know how many times this happened now, but that's just apparently a thing. You just get up and go, right? I mean, they're nomadic peoples. I don't know how much they have to pack up necessarily this way. I mean, they got some of their stuff, but they're built for mobility, right? That's how these people survive in the steppe. They can basically go anywhere for long periods of time and survive. They're survivalists. They can live anywhere, and know how to deal with it. Yeah, any circumstances. So, but there does seem a lot of just bailing on people and leaving them behind.
Sure if she horses and took flight, but Borte was left behind. Nobody is sure if she volunteered to stay behind, as her grandmother had, or if Temujin lost track of her in the confusion, or if he left her behind in a calculated move to give them all time to escape. But in the end, it was effective. When the Merkits found Borte, they halted their pursuit and took her captive. Temujin, for his part, fled to the mountains, lying low and following the elk trails he had known since childhood. 4 days later, he emerged, and seeing that the coast was clear, was overcome with gratitude for having survived. He vowed to always honor the mountains as the place of his deliverance. Temujin saw his survival as a sign that he was special in the eyes of the spirits, truly destined for greatness.
You could take it that way.
But Temujin was devastated at having lost his wife. He had 3
Bailed
options.
on his wife.
He could return to his old camp and his pastoral life, but no matter how much he might build up and acquire for himself, there would always be the constant risk that some other enemy might come along and he would lose it all in another raid. He could head north toward the wooded, isolated lands of his childhood, but those desolate lands lacked pasture for animals. Living there would require his family to scrape by as he had in childhood.
Yeah, the one thing that these people are dependent on, since they're nomadic, they are not sedentary, meaning they move. And they basically have to move with their animals to where, you know, that whole like moving to greener pastures thing, that's kind of like a literal thing here. You go where the resources are, right? And when you use those up or whatever, then it's time to move on. You move with the seasons. You are totally at the mercy of the geography. You're not manipulating the geography like a sedentary society, and you kind of have to in this region. The up here in the northern steppe in Asia, Eurasia, it doesn't suit well to agriculture. There's not even many natural rivers and things like that. The climate can be, again, quite cold and quite hostile. But it does lend itself to domesticating of animals, and so they do that a lot, where you move the animals around, and you have to move around because you can use up the resources pretty quickly there. And it gave them a livelihood, and not just for themselves, it actually gave them an economy too. These people often did business with sedentary communities, like the Chinese ones, for example, where they could trade like animals, right? Like they had the best horses in the world and other animals, and they could trade those to sedentary communities, again like China, for like agricultural products or specialty products that they make. So it gave them not just an internal economy, but like an external economy for trade.
Living there would require his family to scrape by as he had in childhood, fishing and trapping and catching birds. It would be a safe life, but neither prosperous nor honorable. The third option was to follow the river south to seek the help of his patron, Ong Khan. Though Temujin had declined the offer to take a position under Ong Khan's authority a year ago, now that his newly built life was shattered, it seemed the only way to recover his bride. Ong Khan was enraged that the Merkits had acted against someone under his protection, and offered Temujin 20,000 warriors to retaliate against them. He also suggested that they enlist the help of his childhood friend and blood brother, Jamuka, who had become Khan of his own tribe by this time. Jamuka had experienced his own adversities, having been captured by the Merkits and forced into slavery just as Temujin had. But he too had escaped. He had built his own following and was now head of his own clan.
And got revenge on the mind.
He was eager for a chance to take revenge on the Merkits and to help his blood brother, providing another 2 cavalry divisions to Temujin's
How many
force.
we got now?
They sent messengers back and forth across
like
the steppe,
40,000 or something?
arranging where and when to meet. Jamukha arrived at the appointed time and place, but Temujin and Ongg Khan's forces took their time, meeting up along the way before proceeding to the rendezvous. When they finally arrived, Jamukha was livid. He had 6,000 men under his command, each with 2 or 3 spare horses. The army's 15,000-odd horses alone were grazing 5,000 acres of grass per day, to say nothing of the horses of the families already living in the valley. All of his soldiers were geared up for battle, sleeping in the rough, and eating through their limited food supplies, and increasingly anxious to get back to their families.
Right,
and
they want to be
moreover,
done.
such an enormous force of men and horses were not exactly inconspicuous. Any wandering Merkit might have seen what was going down and galloped off to warn the others. Jamukha scolded Ongg Khan and Temujin, who were like, yeah, fair enough, our bad. The combined armies made their way north to the Merkit camp.
Learned a lesson there,
this was
probably.
the beginning of a rift between Temujin and Jamukha that would only continue to grow. The Merkits lay in wait across a river. Each soldier built a float of reeds and swam across with a horse. The operation was too large to be a total surprise, but as soon as the Merkits realized what was happening, they panicked and scattered. Temujin frantically searched the camp for his wife, calling out her name. Now, Borte didn't realize that it was Temujin himself coming to rescue her.
True.
Any number of raiders or rivals might have been attacking, and she was not up for being captured again. So she was fleeing with the rest of the war prisoners. But when
this has already happened to her, and happens, right? It's like when the new people are coming in, the new invaders are coming in, you're not like messing around. You need to assume the worst, that these people are out to destroy you. You're not going to wait and be like, okay, who are they? What are their intentions and all that? Yeah, you get out of there, right? Ask questions later.
When she heard Temujin's voice over the fray, she recognized it and sprinted through the battle towards him.
Okay.
As she ran to his horse and snatched the reins from his hands, he almost attacked her, thinking she was an enemy.
What?
But as soon as he recognized her, he called off the attack, dismounted in the middle of battle, and embraced her. It was a resounding victory. The Merkits were scattered, both Temujin and Jamukha had their revenge, and Temujin was quickly establishing himself among the Mongols as a leader. But their joy was short-lived. It was discovered that Borte had been raped by her captors, and come back pregnant. 9 months after she had been rescued, she gave birth to a son. Temujin claimed that the boy was his, but because his paternity was never clearly established, the child would never be fully accepted as Temujin's heir. With the Merkits dealt with, Temujin and Jamukha's families combined their camps and lived together. At least for a time, the 2 men were inseparable, riding, hunting, eating, even camping together. They swore their friendship for the 3rd time.
You know, similar to the Catherine video I saw of them, they love to go into these like personal feelings and relationships. Right, very narrative in that way. And I always ask, with those kind of things, those are the hardest things to confirm. Like, how did they truly feel about each other? I mean, yeah, they were like these blood brothers, but like they were inseparable. Is this kind of stuff added to, make it more of a personable story? But the sources on these, are there autobiographical information from either of them that talk about this? I'd be interested to know. If you do know, let me know in the comments. Where all the sources are coming from.
Now as adults, in a public ceremony with their combined followers as witnesses. Standing before a tree at the edge of a cliff, they exchanged golden sashes, key symbols of a Mongol man's identity, as well as horses that they had looted from the Merkits. And because of his blood brotherhood with Jamukha, Temujin enjoyed an elevated status within the tribe. For 1.5 years, things seemed ideal. But time has a way of changing things. Both Temujin and Jamukha were powerful men with aspirations to unite and lead the Mongol tribes. Jamukha supported traditional Mongolian aristocracy, where Temujin believed in a meritocratic method, and as such attracted a broader range and lower class of followers. Jamukha came from a higher lineage than Temujin, and over time began to treat him less as an equal and more as a younger brother or a subordinate. Temujin...
we already know what he does to older brothers. Is that a bit of a prophecy? I don't know.
had killed the last brother figure in his life who had demanded subservience, so, as you can imagine, this did not sit well, and they began to drift apart. One day, as the two men were riding together, Jamukha suggested that they split up their camps, that Temujin should take the goats and the sheep and camp by the river, while Jamukha took the horses and camped closer to the mountains. This was a power move. Horses were the wealth of the steppe.
It's all about the horses.
Horse breeders, such as those Jamukha had descended from, were a noble class. Horses played such an essential role in battle and steppe life that they were a status symbol. The message
Probably where they were
behind
first
Jamukha's
domesticated,
statement
too.
was clear.
Yeah,
he was asserting his authority as a horse breeder and treating Temujin as a lowly shepherd. Temujin was perplexed and returned to his family, relaying the order and asking his mother what she made of it. Borte overheard this and interrupted. She was angry at this betrayal and didn't trust Jamukha any longer. She insisted that they break from the group and set out on their own, along with any of Jamukha's followers who wanted to join them. They fled that very evening, riding through the night to gain as much distance as possible in case anyone decided to pursue. The following dawn, something strange happened. 3 brothers and their families, leading members of minor clans under Jamukha, caught up with them. Then more families from other clans caught up as well. In the end, many of Jamukha's followers chose to join Temujin. Now, they weren't the greatest of families. Jamukha still had the loyalty of the established leaders, but Temujin offered something that Jamukha could not: the prospect of advancement.
Right. A lot of people say about why Genghis becomes such a popular person, and most people attribute to his idea of meritocracy. He came from pretty humble beginnings and kind of believed that you earn your status through your actions. Not a believer of the aristocratic method, right? Like Jamukhan's saying, you're like born into this aristocracy and elite status. And so that meant that people were drawn to that, especially kind of regular folks, right? They can go in there and possibly, raise through, again, your own achievements. So that's one of the things. And that also, in turn, created a ton of loyalty to Genghis. And people usually attribute to the military successes, how loyal of an army he had, which is so important there. So it's not surprising why people would be leaving their clans to join his.
Temujin offered something that Jamukha could not: the prospect of advancement. At the age of 19, Temujin had taken his first great step on the road to
only
leadership
19 at this
and
point.
Power.
Wow.
The rift between Temujin and Jamukha would grow into 2 decades of warfare, as each young man rose in stature as leading Mongol warriors, accrued followers, and built up their bases of power. They would grow from sworn brothers to the bitterest of rivals, splitting the Mongols into a vicious civil war full of raids and killings. Their rift was not just personal, but also ideological. As the rightful heir to his position as Khan and coming from a noble lineage, Jamukha was fighting to maintain tradition and aristocracy. Temujin was a radical who cared more about the quality of his followers' character than their heredity. His following was a motley band of mixed class and origin. He had fought his way up from nothing, going from a ragged child hunting rats in the woods to a respected military leader. His following lacked the legitimacy of Jamukha's noble background, but it was very appealing for those who wanted to find freedom and build a better life for themselves. The fight for the future of the steppe tribes had begun.
Okay. So we've now seen kind of his rise in leadership. We've seen now how he gets his following through sort of promises of meritocracy that doesn't matter where you're at currently, that you'll be rewarded and you'll be treated based upon your actions rather than your lineage and your bloodline there. So that would make sense. Again, that why he would get the following that he does. What they really haven't gone to is how he's going to become a military kind of mastermind in that way, which is coming because it looks like he hasn't really led really that much like military organization yet. but that's going to be coming, and that's what, of course, he's most known for is the success in conquest. Okay, but his idea too of this meritocracy too is also a foreshadow of the type of empire he's going to create, which as an empire also held to those kind of standards too. There's a lot of diversity, and again, the meritocracy being a key feature of that. That's something that empire that eventually he creates is going to be known for, and you see again those inclinations he has at a very young age. All right, well, fantastic. I'm glad to get this started. I'm definitely interested in seeing more. So we just watched here parts 1 and 2 of this series. Again, I believe there are 6 parts. So we'll do the next couple parts in the next video. So if you like that, make sure you stay tuned. If you haven't subbed yet, invite you to, especially if you like this kind of format of a history teacher talking about history videos. That's great. I do a lot of live premieres as well, so if you would like to know when those happen, another good idea might be to enable notifications so you can see when that happens. We have a live chat, and we talk about the video kind of as it goes on, and makes for usually some pretty good discussion. A couple other invitations. If you would like to join our Discord channel, there'll be a link down below where history conversations will continuing. You can also help support this channel by making donations to either the Patreon, which is also linked below, or you can make a donation through Streamlabs as well, which with links down below as well. So, all right. Nevertheless, though, I really appreciate you being here. I hope to see you soon, and we'll see you then.